This is the last reading of the fall semester. There is an exciting lineup for the spring semester. I will not be curating that because I'm on leave in the spring, but my co-curator, Hilary Gravendike, along with Jeffrey G. O'Brien, will be curating the spring series. So you can expect it to run with the smoothness to which you are accustomed. The spring readings are going to begin with a reading by Nathaniel Mackey, then Erin Moray, who will be coming from Canada to read, then Lynn Din, and then Lytle Shaw will read. Lytle is the Holloway, will be the 2007-2008 Holloway poet, so he'll be in residence for all of the spring semester and teaching a 143B class here. And then Ariana Rains will end out the spring semester. Dates are more or less fixed, but I don't want to bore you with giving them. And you can go to our website, holloway.berkeley.edu, and find out more details, both about dates and about the poets. It's been a real pleasure working with Hilary this semester and curating a series. It's been a particularly happy one, and it is culminating in a particularly, for me, happy event. And so I'm now going to turn the podium over to Charity. And thanks all for coming. Oh, and don't go away at the end. We'll have a short Q&A with Rachel, and then, of course, the raffle drawing. Okay, please come, Charity.
So if you read the website, you know that Gillian Kidd Osborne grew up beside the Hudson River, worked in a bookstore in Paris, spent a year teaching high school English in Japan, and received her BA in Comparative Literature at Columbia University. What Gillian didn't say is that at Columbia, she won the Ford Poetry Prize and the Bunner Award for the Best Essay on American Literature for an essay she wrote on Emily Dickinson and the performance of death. Gillian was an editor for the Columbia Review and worked for the editorial poetry board of the graduate journal Columbia, a journal of literature and art. While at Columbia, Gillian says that she also had the opportunity to work for the MFA office making photocopies for such notable poets as Richard Howard and Lucy Brockbroido, as well as the former poetry editor of The New Yorker, Alice Quinn. Gillian's poetry has appeared in the Threepenny Review, and she is studied at the New York State Summer Writers Institute. But I'd like to say a little something about her work. It is sometimes hushed, sometimes intense, but always seriously wonderful. In one of my favorite poems, Nuclear Winter, Dinosaurs, and Ophelia Converge, it is a love poem that, among other things, directs us to look at what is in the air still, and so much is crowding there, pressing through resemblances that are just right and strange, and we are, the poet is, falling and flying at once. This is the good disorientation of poetry. It is fearless. It allows for a wonderfully ludicrous or the ludicrously wonderful, but that's only a very small part of beginning. So I'm very happy to welcome Gillian Osborne.
Okay, thank you. This first poem is called Letter to Another Hamlet Impersonator. Ever since you ran off with Ophelia, things haven't been the same. Do you know what I'm getting at? I find my inbox flooded with wildflowers. Perhaps I should be more pointed and ask, what were you thinking, you jerk? Recently, I've been remembering that afternoon we spent in Battery Park City, contemplating Jersey's epic skyline, the Statue of Liberty, a hazy blip to the south. We talked about nuclear winter and how long dinosaurs had roamed the earth. You said, if we were stegosauruses, we'd just walk into this river and go, jutting your hand forward into our future as prehistoric pea-brain lizards. If you were a dinosaur, you said lovingly, I'd do you in the Hudson River. Why are you always saying things like that? And why did you do Ophelia while I was at work? I packaged Sweet William and Onethera at the flower market while you did the nasty with that most sweet-cheeked of all sweet-cheeked girls. I've been escaping to the island's edge to think things through. Today, I communed with the Brooklyn Bridge, resting my hands on its flanks. It somewhat resembled a brachiosaurus, and I wanted to climb up its neck and stick my head up into the sky and feel falling and flying at once. You studied how to build bridges, but never availed yourself of the skill. O engineer, O actor, what do you know about making your way through air? Okay. This poem is called Self-Portrait as the Blind Flower Girl in City Lights. And City Lights is an early silent Chaplin film in which he, as a tramp, falls in love with a blind girl who sells flowers. So, Self-Portrait as the Blind Flower Girl in City Lights. I know you by the way you slammed the door, left me your change, metal drawing moisture from the palm, the smell of money, almost the smell of rain. I had gardenias in a basket, and drove off in something sounding expensive. How was I to know it was stolen? Come back, thief. Like all girls first in love, I would only believe the best of you. At my mother's home, I lace my fingers in the birdcage by the window as I listen to lovers walking down the stair. Come back. After we were married, you confessed that you had never left, stood watching on the corner under the window, and later, when I learned to see, I learned how you looked at me like a love-struck tramp. But that was all before I traced the stark outline of the world, shadow and light, before I loved your expression-ready face and learned how penniless our love would be, and before the contrast of sight made me realize what it is to be blind. I loved the sound of you at a distance, departure, and the hope of again. This is called Instructions for Building a Kite. First, paper. No, first wood, then paper. No, first the story in which my grandfather builds a kite for my father. What did it look like? A box full of air. Where did it go? Up, up, and away, and away. Decades later, a nylon body washed up on the beach, dressed in neon lime and pink. Will it fly again? I asked my cousin when he wore it like a set of wings flapping in circles on the purple-packed sand. The answer was obvious. The biggest one in the world then, kept like a dragon in Japan. 2 minutes afloat before the forest tore it to splinters and rags. One kind of history is a series of things that fell from the sky. You then and me in the woods by the lake. You had glue on your hands, so I had glue in my hair, on the soles of my feet, stuck to the earth and the air. When you made it, it was first paper, then wood. First wood, then paper, then wind, and the sky stretching to let it come in. This is called The Room. In the empty room, a hand was penning in abrasive cursive the sound of spoilage of broken glass. A phonograph was sputtering in a bath. Then there was a reckoning. The eiderdown plucked, the plants upturned as in an earthquake, the cause and the aftermath unraveled. You pulled the blankness over our heads, and we talked like children of nothing and how to find it and keep it as long as we both shall live. Inside each other, we thought some things might be something else if we let them. So we did. There was a certain shuffling, the sound of things returning to a place. Feathers belonged to a bird, and the jade plant clippings tipped slowly toward the light. Then, in that empty room of rooms, we pointed, for once having something perfect to point at. Bamboo. A glass of water, and then the sun coming into the yellow room, and the reflection like a bird across your chest, but only for a moment, then your humdrum lying down, naked in that ineloquent way that is more exposed than natural, just as you were yesterday or the day before. I wanted to tell you about the bamboo, their feathered arms and stalks, like slim ghosts, but I have already lost the sound they made standing there, saying nothing as I rode by on a bike. It is night now, and though they are alive, somewhere in the dark, they have left me. Okay, this poem is called Tiger, Tiger Made of Paper. What is a paper tiger, and where can I meet one? I would place him on my mantelpiece, so when I'd look at him, I'd think, many things are made of paper. Perhaps a paper tiger would not like to be my bric-a-brac. He would rather eat me. I know how it is, so I would give him time to get used to the idea, let him pace the room until he found the perfect place in which to appear effectual. Then I would approach him sweetly and run my fingers through his paper fur and call him gentle paper names, his paper eyes watching me, his paper whiskers like thinking ticker tape. I'd put my hand upon his paper paw. I wonder if, being paper, he would be hollow, and if so, I might crawl inside and wonder what it is to be a tiger. He, in turn, might like having me alive inside him. We would both want to be taken seriously. It is hard to be a thing made out of paper. You may suppose that he was crafted by a greater hand, but he is not that kind of tiger, no origami beast. He even has paper teeth. This is the hummingbirds. I stopped for the cosmos that could be picked and put in a vase. The hummingbirds, like grandiose insects, yanked their plump black bodies and electric wings between one place and another, assuming so little I didn't see them at all, until you asked, why do they fly around so much, as if they could just sit down and sip their nectar? Is it because these creatures with the world's most prolific heartbeat understand the dictum of blood, how it runs, never to suit you, but because you were designed to beat your wings 1,000 times per second, or to recognize beauty only at certain junctures, even if it is beauty that makes you feel alive? Okay, and this is the last poem that I'm going to read, and it begins with an epigraph by one of my Japanese students who was assigned to write a very brief essay on the topic, what are the good and bad points of having pets? So the epigraph was, this was the entire essay. It is serious that the fish changes water, and it is serious that the dog strolls. So, most amazing moment in Japan ever. So this poem is called It is Serious in the Animal Kingdom. It is serious that the kangaroo contains a pocket leading from one world to the next. It is serious that the octopus turns purple if you boil it. And it is serious that the cat sleeping in the window will rouse, go outside, and bat a snake beneath the hedgerow. It is serious that the giraffes living in the Bronx Zoo were the reason we met. It is serious that the flamingo is not that color because of what he eats. And it is serious that the worm comes in segments. Also, it is serious that the spider hung like a drop of blood outside the door kept the postman from delivering your letter. But perhaps it is more serious that the frog serenades his lovers in the rice field and that afterwards the tadpole swerves between shoots. It is serious that the panther cries and the mourning dove cries and the humpback whale cries and the honeybee cries, but the jellyfish doesn't make a sound. It is serious that the week before my horse died, I saw you rolling with it in the snow and that you lost your keys there in the pasture belonging to my dead horse. It is serious that the turtle that was almost crushed was rescued by my mother from the highway. It is serious that the moth I found floating in the puddle was yellow. It is serious that the dinosaur, some say, had feathers, and it is serious that the squirrel is a rare creature for the Japanese tourist. It is serious that the Asian dragon and the European dragon have almost nothing in common but are united in their ability to cause terror. It is serious that those fireflies lived in an oak tree by the ocean where Sylvia Plath considered drowning. It is serious that the snail lost in New York City meant more to me than all the poetry I read my first semester at school. It is serious that humans envy those creatures with wings, as well as the lazy ones napping their life away. It is serious that the snake in my father's dream made him fall out of the bed in the middle of the night and break his wrist. It is serious that the otters gorging on mussels made love seem like such a simple thing. Thank you.
How did you grade that student essay?
I really
Oh, disclosure not permitted. So I know many of you. My name is Katherine Cronquist Browning. I'm a graduate student in the English department here, and it's my great pleasure and privilege to welcome Rachel Levitsky tonight. When I was reading different biographical sketches of Rachel Levitsky, I was excited to discover that she lives steps away from a New York botanical garden. You may not immediately understand why, but my grandfather, Arthur Cronquist, was a botanist, and he worked for many decades and is in fact buried, or rather, his ashes are scattered in a botanical garden in New York. This oblique connection between me and Rachel, her proximity to the ashes of my ancestors being reborn as vegetation, and my proximity to the variety of human relationships which she reforms into poetry, seemed an attractive figure, an attractive gateway into talking about how Rachel Levitsky's poetry reformulates our ideas about human and textual relationships. But it was not to be. My grandfather worked at the New York Botanical Gardens. Rachel Levitsky lives by the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens. It was a case of missing me one place, search another. I was looking for Rachel in one place, a personal place, in which distance and family and connection could mediate my response to her. But the world insisted, rightly, that I take Rachel Levitsky's work entirely on her own terms, divorced from my pre-existing ideas about the way to relate, the way to connect. It insisted that I experience her work without mediation. Because her poetry is, in my humble reading, hopefully maybe she will correct me in a moment, her poetry is continually interested in the way to connect, to understand and abolish the separation between human beings. In her first full-length volume of poetry, which I encourage you to check out up here if you haven't read it before, Under the Sun, published by Future Poem Books in 2003, she connects and disconnects two personas in particular, lady and turtle, putting them together and pulling them apart in different formulations, making them intensely real and delightfully witty, while retaining all the intensity and violence of the subjective interaction of self and other. Her poetry appears in many places and many media. In addition to Under the Sun, she is the author of 5 chapbooks of poetry, Dearly, Dearly 356, Cartographies of Error, The Adventures of Yaya and Grace, and 2 one-by-one portraits. She writes poetry plays, 3 of which have been performed in New York and San Francisco, and her work has been published in numerous magazines, such as Sentence, Fence, The Brooklyn Rail, Global City, The Hat, Skanky Possum, and Lungful, and in the anthology 19 Lines, a drawing center writing anthology. She founded Belladonna, an event and publication series for avant-garde poetics, in August 1999. And last year, and if my web search is accurate, she contributed to a collaborative blog entitled Talking Narrativity. She currently teaches at the Pratt Institute. Dale Smith has aptly called her a writer committed to social and spiritual change. I hope she will forgive me for prefacing her reading with my own autobiographical meditations on the social and spiritual change her writing occasioned for me. Please join me in welcoming Rachel Levitsky.
Thank you, Katherine. That was great. And I'll address it at some point because you're kind of right on, and you'll see why. Hello, everybody. It's really good to be here. Thanks, Hillary, Lynn, Jack, all of you. I'm really happy to be here. So I'm going to read some poems that were written a long time ago to begin with, but that don't feel old today. And then I'm going to read for about 20 minutes from a new project that's in progress called The Story of My Accident Is Ours. So this was published in this is a poem actually in Cartographies of Error, and there's this great anthology called Bowery Women Poets, and it's poems, and it's kind of, there's all these women in it, and there's pictures of each one, and there's really great biographies. It's a very nice anthology. And there's been all these events, like for a year, like there's been a sort of a community thing about it. And I finally got to one the other day. I was like, God, I really missed out on this great thing. So I feel inspired to read this poem. Los Angeles. The crowd, like geese, forms as a V. We try to live in the gaps between clouds. They form a Jewish star. It is difficult to leave the country because of the disaffected armies guarding the borders, but not impossible. The last prohibition we fight is the one against sex. We leave that to the unborn children. We continue to purse our lips, waiting for the correct lover to land as David Bowie or some other guy with narrow eyes. We imagined the mountain's colors. The car was only a two-wheel drive, so couldn't get it up. We missed the mountain's colors. Like superheroes, we dived under iced-over river to avoid capture and came out like stroke victims, but still alive. We positioned ourselves hell-bent on the recovery. It was what was said, that we wanted to make love. Using the window or the clutter inside as source material, watching for time, creating maps of origins, genes for purpose. The reason we continue to live is, most often we don't expect the things we are accused of, which consist of identity and calling ourselves by awful names, saying the way I was is who I am. I don't want to veer too far from that. I'd have to end my life. It wouldn't be worth it. My poetry would never get published, and my mother would be dead, and who'd be responsible for the typos? What would be impossible is convincing them of something new, an unnameable fruit that resembles pussy. She never need be sensitive again. All that time, no space. And a little bit from Dearly, which I always wanted it to look like a wedding invitation. It kind of does. Morningly. Laughs out loud, teeth, a bit of gum, like a horse, red, the stubble, the stable, knee bending out loud, the bones, burning for attention, 14 Sundays without breath, wordless addict. Southernly, move as little as when you were little, the pile, the spider, little Miss Muffat, sat on the bed, chews on her curls, and neighs. She can't get away, can't wait to get away. Nightmarishly, unevenly, say nothing, count the flies. Lightingly, go on, I'll dig you later. Suspectingly, eyingly, what mothers are capable of. When your smile entered my heart, the moment was so spectacular, it bent me and I became a bender, a victor, a lady killer, a rather inhospitable kindness, a public grief punished by fame. Harangue, what is love? Your good works kill me. And a little bit from Dearly 346. Maybe transitioning into prose with this kind of. Does seem it has a name, but it doesn't really have a name. How I'm living, but without an I. How I'm living. Does seem, in way, attached to pain, returns at heels of days, pleasure, freedom, but no, not like Miss Hitter, Dr. B, suggesting some pathetic, objectified notion, artist, artful without pain, though there is judgment, not time to relax with others, no simple converse, all time, building time, trying to remember condition, not anxiety, pre-P, pre-S, mon, machine-like efficiency, clarity of visage, so thinking at time, on street looking out, now eyes too going, needs eye doctor and dentist each day rushing, what about news? Not sleeping, not wanting sleep, not smoking, and thus next thing, cause, addiction, habit, secrets of the night, as pleasure, cat peeing again on floor while M in room, no longer punishing, counterproductive, but thinking time for doctor. BG climbs on top, square on top, as he watches defeatedly, not sex, awake, still past 4 a.m., a kind of defiant. I fixed the sink, knew I could, try to sleep now. Try to sleep. Now, try masturbate. Not mention C nor N, both significant first note to say the M1 of mind. When think speaking, think frustrating, boredom, anthem, wondering, however. Comment. I felt that. Sick, touch, welcome, raping, attack. Shit, a roommate, heavens for it. Still scares, a bit, so sex. Called Marina for just 1 week, coarse, wary, and misplacing, identifying appendages, wallets, plural, transform little one to stud sometimes, bodacious, kind, in world of kind, imagining utopia, the body type of sexy yes, no, sexy no, loud complaint, okay, to natural, looking great, who did your work, knowing it wasn't, her daughter corner, one looking like a whore, bitter, stupid, remains sitting, sexist, Iowa, Ohio, matters, VV, length, sketch, between kindness, i.e. resentment, torture, failure, resentment. She upset, I bottom over blank before recuperate. San Andre, a revelation with wine to prevent the heart from stopping. Dying, trying to tell, demands a sacrifice, a young nubile, an eye, a thigh bone. Hunting dream causes another, earlier genocide, later 1-2, different map for the underground, which changes due to density and velocity in that order. Somewhere formula possible to revive, impossible. Somewhere human cord and herself snug outward toward blue lines. Some of them sky, sea and desert, some sand. Hard to have fun while hunted. Love, then last night public conversation, party, talking how'd be country one day, inquiring plan, injuring, listed possible one could country, UJA summer, get job. There were others, none is planned because no, is everything all at once, no, counterintuitively love, rather want, wanting around, all around, though S, inherent, contradict, mother, love kills, dream. Sitcom in which main character buggering a woman only up the butt thinks saving tightness, assumes for him, confesses considering her for love and marriage. She cries, moved by this, moved by moving the unmovable rake. As get up from their love bed, a massage table, crisp white sheets. We see a 5 o'clock shadow on her face. Know now why she won't let him penetrate her puss, because impenetrable, a canvas, facade. But by now macho, fully involved, convincing himself of fiction, his love. Watchers knowing that inevitably will go terribly wrong, but meanwhile enjoy dupe and dream. Interruption problem, writing, particularly dreams, so tracks only memory, traces on memory, went to work on Tuesday but not Wednesday. On Tuesday had no students, then had one, even though had no students, wasn't prepared. Instead went to bank, prepared ends arrival, nervous, not feeling well, not great simply because of busy, the winter, but also vowels which require diligence, lettuce, plane, and whatnot. Picked up N, bound to question, picked up N, airport, in-car champagne, picked her up nervous, driving, so made her do it coming off plane. On way home after she was coming off the plane, made her do it because bad eyes another subject. Bad eyes is one of subjects. Lately, since self-absorbed, latest revelations about the self, statement on disintegration of my eyes since superhuman before, an exaggeration, and once repeated most certainly is. Once you repeat, it's exaggeration. The headache wasn't really a migraine. Once said true, the headache was a migraine. I remember that time, actually. So I'm going to read from this piece in progress. It's called The Story of My Accident is Ours, and it takes the form of a novel in many ways. I'm going to have some water. Oh, I remember what I wanted to say, Katherine. So I think of it as a trilogy with Under the Sun and Neighbor, which obviously is sort of coping with some other relationships, and the one that is in here. So sort of the various levels of closeness and distance. And it's interesting because I was thinking about it today, that the relationship of Turtle and Lady is clearly a romantic relationship, but in a way it was the most spacious relationship of them all, and perhaps the one in this book is the least, i.e. the story of my accident is ours, right? If I no longer exist, if in fact I may never have existed in the first place, then do I have a name? What is in a name? Certainly we can ask these questions about such a name as Jane. It was in my thinking about our names that I began to tell the story. Perhaps it is the origin, or rather the originary root, of my accident. But my accident, which may have begun when it occurred to me that I did not know my name, nor the name of any of us, came after the events of the story, which begins to be written when I begin to think this way about our names. Distinctions and their consequences. Ultimately, and ironically, it was the discovery, consumption, and production of happiness that first caused us to seek out the names we sought from outside of ourselves, we who until then were, though aware of ourselves as selves, remarkably nameless. The names we were called when we were called upon. We were called upon often and frequently, operated like tags, verbal identifiers, but not like signs. Signs, we are told, are mentally comprehensible units that take on a discrete meaning in the mind, distinct, that is, from the message the original represents. But the names we were called conjured nothing except our conditioned response to being called upon, most often for a task desired by another, requested from us, and not infrequently as a means to clarify our presence at a job. We were, therefore, perfectly good at our jobs, which were not, after all, demanding. Absolutely, we were bored. Our boredom at the job did not particularly seem different than our boredom somewhere else, or in most of the other circumstances of our lives, which were rather constrained despite the giddy proliferation of stuff with which they were filled. I am doubtful, though, whether what we experience, this tremendous aspect that seems to demand representation, this all-consuming absence of affect with which we were left, such that for us even fear was foreign, outside immediate experience, though something we recognize as a need, to be therefore pursued in movie theaters or by forcing out what was under our skin and therefore sealed through the surface into a shared and public field of vision, assessment, objectification, tactile structure, something supra-organic, though having had once belonged to us lacking names, unnameable, untenable, adrift but not wandering, was actually boredom after all, but rather a constant state of seasickness, in the way that seasickness implies the struggle of land leaving the body, land which exists and is missed. We were wandering, but not, despite the look in our face and the speed which we seemed to lack, without purpose. We were far from without purpose. From almost any angle. We'd woke into the world like characters you'd see in a science fiction movie, the ones without parents, cloned for the purpose of replacing the organs of the rich, or jailed indefinitely or repeatedly for our childbearing abilities. We had the appearance of arriving whole, the sets of our features predetermined and complete. We were defined by limitation. We've been kept away from history by serial clearances, the slums, the streets, the poor, then the rich, then the home, then the street, then the neighborhood, then the mall, and then the mall. We recognize each other by the vacant look in our eyes and the sophistication of our speech when we had the energy to speak. We were not quite like creatures in zombie movies that were popular again in our time. We didn't join in the common cause of destroying one another or making another more like us. We didn't have killer instincts, nor did we think that what we were should necessarily be multiplied, though we were confused about the ways we did have, what they were and how they'd come to be. What we knew better than what we were was what we were strange to. We were strange to the ways of smiles possessed by the ones on television and outside in front of the church, or of two passing each other in the case in which one is walking on the sidewalk and another is driving to deliver a package from a truck. We do not mean to be unfriendly nor dour, though I can now see we have often and legitimately been so perceived. At one point in time, I cannot imagine we could have been perceived any other way. Left by ourselves, we didn't know how else to be. We were mostly all one way. We ourselves walk around puzzled by the feeling or the knowledge that although we are left by ourselves, we have not made ourselves. That is, we have by default been given responsibility for ourselves in those places, at times entire areas, over which those who made us exert control, neither by nuanced suggestion nor explicit design. The vast absences that conjoin us to each other are ironically, and I'm of the strong opinion that this is unforeseen by those who'd made us and cleared these spaces, the basis of our moral and political formation. In retrospect, it sounds abstract, but there was so much we did not know. There is still so much. For example, we remain incapable of competition or unkindness, or kindness for that matter. There is nothing abject about our material circumstances. We've been provided the instruction and the means to go through the motions of living as the middle class. But there were gaps, moments we felt ourselves reaching for a thing that was neither there nor named. It was in these gaps that something told us something wrong was being done to us. Something, but not the thing, and thus the realization became, in effect, one of the many incongruities which led us irretrievably toward my accident. The accident. The first thing we tried was to examine our world from every angle. We were made uncomfortable by the notion of blind spots. The revolutions had suggested a science so advanced as to be unlimited by science and therefore capable of presenting something true, though momentary. We liked the momentary. It provided us the rare breaks we took from responsibility. We tried to see the world from every angle. We did not think that meant we were in charge. To look at the world from almost any angle, you would believe it is true. We are universally submerged into the deepest, darkest depth of our spectacle of consumption, and that it is nearly impossible to not be that way, since to not be that way would mean making enemies with those you would need to have as friends. That is why we go to the movies. We can say it in the movies. We can be anyone, be strong, because in addition to superhuman brains, we achieve superhuman bodies, hearts. We think humor must be grand, for we observed how an idea can be taken and stretched into a visual image that can mimic the funniest exaggerations and make it last for over 20 minutes. That was there, or here, where it begins with Baudrillard or Benjamin. No, with Bataille. Most certainly it begins with Bataille, for it was he who saved the project for a later date. The project is very courageous, and some of us continue to attempt it and fail. To attempt it is obviously to fail. Even in death, we fail. However, and so, we have taken to doing something we call our best. Our best keeps us going with some degree of hope and calm. It does not make us smug, but our anxiety, when we do not do our best, is deadly. We try our best to make sense of death when anxiety kills. At first, then we try talking to it, then fighting with it. Finally, we do it all, but with the knowledge that we are exactly where we started and go back to doing it the best we can. This is why we are called radical. You cannot know right away if you are able to do it. We live in a way which both holds you accountable and forgives you for your inability. There is a resignation about us. We have watched the revolutions carefully and have not come up with anything fresh, anything that will not be anticipated nor is not destroyed before it has been thought of. We take comfort in the most predictable, unfettered human habits. We reject the institutional. It makes us, quite literally, itch. The project. Our limitations. Oh, this says no. Sorry. The accident. The sun is out in the morning after a night of rain hitting the roof above. It doesn't matter. Every scene of the accident must be recalled over and over ad infinitum because its revelations are slow and endless, each one leading to less thinking than the one before it. Not thinking does nothing, makes for no difference in the story, which begins with thinking correctly and acting exactly the same as if your actions had been innocent. We walk into the accident knowing it will happen. It is afterwards we feel a sense of uncertainty. Should we call the police? To look at the uncertainty from another angle, one could feel shame. But we are innocent. The only method we had for avoiding the accident was offered by those who had made us, who had made such a long and hollow space of us. The lover. To look at a lover from any angle is the meaning of love. I am restating something Picasso said when I say that beauty is monumental when the absurd grotesque of one angle meets in forceful equality the graceful dignity of another. In a lover that is being looked at from any angle, these positions are mobile. This is the meaning of love. We are wary in this case, for we are wary in general, of parts that fit together too neatly. We cannot bear suffering without a show, a paroxysm. The paroxysm outsizes our container. Our container explodes. We refit accordingly. It can't be easy. I take it we must be born with or learn to develop strong hearts. Still, we often feel as though we could die of this world. We often do. My death. I then, of course, saw my death before I died. Though by then, it is true, I could not stop it. I'd already walked into the accident knowingly, but by the time it was about to happen, I and the others had fully and completely set our course. There was no outcome other than my death. The movies, Free with Killing. I appreciate the way in the movies Free with Killing, death takes on a different logic. If everyone in her life is killed in front of her, we don't mind so much the noise she makes that will lead the killers to killing her as well. What would be worse would be to think about the reality of her life alone, with this blood before her eyes always. Because what we'd empathize with was the possible future life of a little girl appearing for 20 seconds in a film. We are born of an abstraction. We are not made uncomfortable by the idea of where we end and our abstraction begins. We are not yet made of abstraction, not and not entirely. Therefore, I can assure you that when I speak of death, I am speaking of an actual death, neither abstract nor metaphorical. The story around my accident. I often wonder what it was that drove me, and by me I want to explain someone like me toward that imminent disaster, for I am neither self-destructive nor suicidal. Most of us were neither of those things. Occasionally one postures, urged on by the loneliness, but even we who do, fools as we are, can soon acknowledge the error in our ways. One born of misreading our loneliness, which most often results in our deep embarrassment over our behavior that was caused by said confusion. Obvious, this last comment and the next, that another common distraction was drink, perhaps even more common and oblivious than the false suicides. Tedious. Us drinkers became tedious, in part because by the century's definitions, we would enter program. It wasn't an impulse towards suicide nor self-destruction that led me to my accident. I should say the accident, because officially it was not mine alone. I have come to think of it rather as disorientation, not of sexual disorientation or sexual orientation, for that matter, because like the German Heimlich and Unheimlich and the English ravel and unravel, they are more alike than opposite. For to be overly sexually oriented, help me out here. Oriented, no, that's not right either. Was understood as a repressed disorientation, or the opposite. I cannot remember. Either way, on this issue, which was a popular centerpiece of conversation in our time, I was well balanced or disoriented. It is hard to say which. I had two loves in my life, many lovers, but two loves, and one had been a woman and one had been a man. Neither made sense in any way, but that story is still to come. But not tonight. Okay. And we'll shift gears a little. Happiness. I'm sort of obsessed with happiness, as is the character. I have a character, isn't that amazing? Since my accident, I have exerted some effort toward my thinking about happiness. At the beginning of our stirrings, or during that time in which we, as the group of us, were most cohesive and concentrated in our actions and activities, the state, concerned that the erasures and subsequent evenness it had effected was producing a massive ennui among its people, released a happiness campaign whose earmark was an omnipresent billboard that read, "Happiness for all beings." At first, these signs read happiness for all people, no matter color, creed, nor class. Besides the obvious troubles with the poetry of the phrase, which issued from a well-intentioned but misguided desire to articulate its revolutionary, progressive, and democratic commitments, its election campaign slogan had been, "All things to all people." There were complaints. The Spiritualists, who, to our surprise, had become a tightly organized activist force in our time, launched their own campaign by way of constant media of every sort at all hours, every day. Their numbers were, by this time, vast. To merely change the phrasing slightly so that beyond the limitations set by the word people, the slogan would include all things. For they, the Spiritualists, understood, as we did, that language has meaning. Thus, a slight change in the wording of this government campaign could move people's consciousness, could in fact be radical, even in its own religious right. A change in the phrasing such by this slight alteration would mean shifting the orientation from a state advertisement that amounted to something like happiness propaganda to a polite request to consider a different notion of consciousness. And though we were a bit mocking of the Spiritualists for their funny science, we were impressed by this coup that they had gotten the state to essentially do their bidding. Some of our alcoholics and suicides were so impressed, they made an attempt to join the Spiritualists themselves, logically reasoning this could for them kill two birds with one stone, and knew better than to repeat this idiom in the presence of their new community, which espoused a reverence for all beings, and would find such lackadaisical and cruel language behavior, if not irredeemable, something to require corrective treatment, or to put put it less disruptively, and into the language habit of the spiritualists themselves, it provided a win-win situation, for not only were they effective politically, their program suggested support for the very vulnerabilities our alcoholics and suicides experienced. It didn't work. It wasn't the very same vulnerabilities among them and us all. The happiness the spiritualists offered made us feel lethargic and dumb, which was the very situation we've been trying our whole lives, living in this world, to diagnose and, if not cure, at least improve, with dialogue and great attempts toward the invention of a difference, a change of some sort, the possibility of which seems to defy logic, for how could we become other than as we were, especially since we were following the design planned by both us and them, all one way. Yet it persisted in us, the notion that if we made a heroic effort, stayed focused, and cared a very great deal about it, then at least an incremental alteration might reform us and the world in which we found ourselves, and that would be enough, all that were necessary, however little it'd be. Mischievous traces. Our uncanny confidence in the revolutionary result of a slight shift in the possibilities of our world created both a common space and a sharp division between us and most of the other sorts milling about in our times, including those on the television with broad, radiating smiles. Of all the sorts and possible sorts, it was our particular closeness to the spiritualists we found most unsettling, so much so that because of it, as a direct result of it, we went forward in the world with a sense of doubt, which also followed us closely from behind, and so was right there upon us when we were suddenly stopped, as they say, dead in our tracks, though at this point in our story, only metaphorically dead, and for all intents and purposes we could have, I mean that we had the physical ability to, continue in another direction, either back or to the left, and that is what we did, but individually, for the path of each was distinct once the path we'd agreed upon was so suddenly interrupted. Beyond their sly efficacy, collective speech habits, and physically etched code of discipline, it was they, the spiritualists, who found comfort in that which we found most frightening. That thing, which is a thing so slippery, I find it difficult to stay with the thought of it over the duration required by writing, but may posit at least these certain defining negatives for the time being. This thing for them and for us both was not fame, nor passivity, not prayer, nor the mean, profiteering, warmongering broadcast everywhere, none of which are exactly the same thing as, but certainly all of which are well connected to, the glimmering smiles on television. Furthermore, and this complicates it and makes it more slippery still, this element that we share with the spiritualists was just as central to them in their ideas as it was to us in ours, though it led them and us to resulting conclusions which are most certainly diametrically opposed. Were the costs not as high and our convictions not so steady, would I feel less tortured while writing this? Perhaps not, but how could they be otherwise? For of all the aspects of life for which my accident may have provided some sort of perspective, hindsight of happenings and their causes and consequences, toward this difficulty in particular it offers nothing. We stay the course, believing as we did then. I did say believing. I haven't yet formulated a more defining language. That though the slight alteration was both the place of possibility and the place of the unknown, we understood it as merely that which we ourselves took responsibility for, and they, well, I am far from a reliable witness, but it was for them that exuberant belief called faith in higher or infinite power, which could rob me of my ability to sleep at night, if I had the ability to sleep at night. For us, the unknown thing for which we desperately wanted to take responsibility was the only thing for which we were confident we had a responsibility. Evidence or sign. It seems needless to say we did not believe in miracles, nor care so much about alien occurrences, even as they affected us. They profoundly affected us. We were especially sensitive to loud noise and random violence perpetrated by the state on unprotected urban bodies, because they were, or we imagined them to be, our bodies. The sudden and specific military or police helicopters, the magical anticipation suggested by the police barricades, which appeared each time we joined each other in a social group on the street, the shooting and neck braces we expected from the police if we did not appreciate their dominating presence. These remained both constant and alien, and despite their presence, which did in fact blur our vision, we often perceived things that indeed looked like evidence of the increment we sought, but in moments which pass as quickly as they reveal themselves, like turning your head to confirm to yourself that you saw a little girl on the sidewalk gliding past you 2 feet above the ground without the aid of a machine. By the time you see her face to face, she is back on the ground smiling at you, and all you have for a fact is that of your confidence or its lack. These moments pass quickly, and because of this very fleeting aspect, don't hold up well, if at all, in the telling. How one knows or thinks they are attending such a window in time and space does itself feel somewhere between impression and intuition. Both are suspicious, even to we who like such things, and are prone to resist the chill of scientific inquiry. Although I do feel strongly that being able to give images toward this thread would help, I find that when I reach for one, I am back to relying on the categories which such revelatory moments of incremental alteration transcend. For it is not that men are not acting like men, nor the rich or famous bearing no affect of reflected projection, but rather that one witnesses an opening in which the terms are expired into the dust they were born to become, when the accumulated anxieties of past experience melt because the stern-looking teacher posted firmly beside you, making you more than a little nervous, with impressive stature emanating from macho bearing and muscular heft, asks, before explaining to you that which you don't yet know, but need to know in order to complete the task to which you've been assigned. Tell me first, how is it you learn best? Thank you.
If there are any cues for A's or comments that anyone would like to, or just points for discussion with Rachel, please raise your hand. Yes, Cecil.
Well, I really love your reading. The work is so expansionist and interconnected. I'm curious what your verse plays are like.
Yeah, the question is from Professor Giscombe is what are Rachel's verse plays like? And maybe you could, from me, you could say something about like relation to Poets Theater and.
Well, one of them I wrote with Megan Camille, who's sitting here, and it was performed here in San Francisco at the Jamboree what about 3 years ago, perhaps? And it's called Reduced Tuesday, and what would you say? Put the pressure off myself for a second. I actually use them as an opportunity to be really lyrical. I'm writing one now where I'm like playing with form, which I've never really done seriously. So I'm rhyming things and stuff like that. They're atmospheric. There's not a lot of action in them. Although the one with Camille was performed, and Sarah Rosenthal, who's reading tomorrow, actually memorized her part of Edna. Was she Edna? Is that right? Anyway, working with Camille was interesting because it actually made me less atmospheric, because Camille said, "No, there's a therapist." I was like, "Oh, a person with an occupation. That's interesting." So, I wrote one also that was part of a 24-hour play thing. Has anybody ever heard? I mean, I know that Rodrigo Toscano is doing a version of this with his, what is it called? What is Rodrigo's project? Collectible. I'm blanking out on it now. But it is a 24-hour version of. But there was where we met the actors before we wrote the play, and then we wrote the play in 12 hours, and the woman that I chose or was going to be in my play sounded like she was underwater, and so that made this character be underwater. And afterwards, she came to me and she said, "My father drowned." It was really intense, but she was really therefore intense while she was acting it out. I mean, it was all kind. I mean, and so yeah, I didn't really have a particular idea, but I was sort of following the spirit of this person. Thank you for your question.
Rachel, you said that it gave you the chance to be really lyrical, and then you said that it was atmospheric. Is that what you meant? I mean, I wondered what you meant.
By lyrical? Well, in some ways I mean less prosy, less sentences, and Yeah, and I think probably also, I mean, more open and fragmentary, and so, yeah. Beth. Hi, Beth.
What's the visceral experience when you're working on the new writing that's more philosophical? How does it feel in your body different when you write than when you write the old way?
So Beth asked me how writing this new piece, which is pretty philosophical, feels differently than previous writing. So my first response is just that I've just completed a manuscript called Neighbor, and I wrote it. I sort of touched upon this period of my life where I quit smoking and couldn't go to sleep because I would have a cigarette before I went to bed every night, and it just. So I wrote Neighbor in the like the middle, between like 3 and 5 in the morning over a year, and I was in this other state. I had no idea what it was. I always felt really humiliated by it. People seemed to like it, but I could never really just feel like I had some handle on it. And actually, with this, I always feel like, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing. I'm right here present. I'm writing it during the day. I'm thinking through problems. I'm sometimes solving them and sometimes not solving them, and I know what the difference is. So I feel, in some ways, more happy, happier.
I was really curious about the we, and I'm wondering whether your relationship to the we, as you're writing, if it's sort of constant and that you always feel comfortable kind of speaking as the we, or if it's something that changes over time and you've kind of had to change your relationship to as the writing is changing the writing. Just wondering about.
So should I restate that question? Megan Camille is asking my relationship to the we, and if my relationship to the we stays comfortable or if it changes over time as I've been writing. And there's a little piece that I was almost going to read tonight in which the we is, sort of putting out this sort of a program, and they're very, the project of making. Did I talk about the project of making a little bit? That they chose not to call it the project of doing. And so that even when there was some doubt, they would put it out there with all its confidence in the next day. But so there's this moment where there's this question of reviewing the events of the day and having an uncomfortable feeling by yourself that perhaps the unity was not actually a fact. I think that probably sort of sums up the we-I relationship. It sort of goes in and out of confidence. Thank you so much.